So without a doubt, the number one problem we hear from our clients and brands every single day is that they struggle to prove the ROI of their influencer campaigns, or that they can't justify the budget to scale the channel either. So Dan and I made it our number one mission to solve that exact problem for our clients a couple of years ago. And over the past couple of years, we've been able to provide the clarity brands need by combining MMM and influencer data together, which Dan will speak through in a lot more detail very, very shortly. But first, I wanted to kind of set the scene a little bit more and take a moment to highlight just how important it is to solve this problem for brands. And that is because it truly is a problem that compounds over time, which then unfortunately can place brands in what we like to call creator cruise control. And what we mean by that is that when the channel is unproven because you're relying on vanity metrics such as maybe EMV, likes, engagement rates, etc., it then becomes completely unscalable, which means that you're then forced to focus on short-term tactics and experience difficulty acquiring new budget, which ultimately then leads to stalled growth. And then thanks to that, we have influencer marketers' worst nightmare, which is that it then becomes a very uninspiring channel with boring creative and no room to innovate. So pretty terrifying stuff for us influencer marketers out there. So to get out of cruise control, if we have to break it down simply, brands need clarity on the data so that you can provide ROI that your leadership can trust, which can then provide you with the confidence to invest in full funnel campaigns that scale. And then as a result of that, it provides you so much more room for creativity to take those big bets on bold ideas that entertain audiences rather than just adding to the never-ending, I think, content slop of the algorithms on TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat. So how can you actually invest more time creating content that matters and that you're proud of and that your brand can actually celebrate and scale? But for both of the latter to happen effectively, clarity is the most important to solve because arguably it is kind of the hardest. Because for a lot of brands, and us at Charlie Oscar, you're probably using dashboards and tracking software to make execution more efficient. However, for a lot of those dashboards, they only show the tip of the iceberg, roughly 20% of metrics. So your typical vanity metrics, which do have a place, I think, you know, although we're going to be talking a lot about how those vanity metrics might not mean much to, you know, senior stakeholders internally, they do have a place when it comes to making maybe informed decisions about which talent to work with, or, you know, green shoots of opportunity. But the other 80%, that's currently hidden and not shown in your dashboards. And when you do uncover that, an entire world of insight opens up. As someone who comes more from the brand and creative side of influencer marketing, it's this data that actually propels, you know, incredible creative thinking and opportunity, and makes the channel kind of, you know, go back to its roots really. And in that it's inherently creative and you need to create good content, and that data does unleash that, it doesn't limit it. So whether it's being able to actually attribute a clear incremental revenue number to your campaigns, which I think we all are desperate to do, is have that revenue number to take to the CFO, to all the way through to understanding which platform or maybe niche of influencer or content type works best at driving the most revenue, we can do that with MMM. So in terms of actually going into how on earth do you actually uncover that 80% and use MMM, I'm now going to pass to Dan, who's going to tell you exactly that.
Cool. Yeah, this is one of my favorite topics, talk about putting the hard pound and dollar symbols back against the value that you create through these sorts of channels. And it's one of my favorite topics because it's one that's massively misunderstood in the industry, really. So a vast chunk of the industry, and especially the measurement industry, part of the industry, essentially measures surface value of a lot of these sorts of activations. So it starts looking at influence marketing, creator marketing, which is fundamentally a broadcast channel, and measuring it as if it's an affiliates channel. So measuring how many people respond directly and leave that content and go and make a purchase largely through clicks and codes, right? So how many people are clicking through to the site, you can track them on a UTM and then they're going through and buying, or how many people are using the voucher code that you've embedded into that content. And some people do that, but not that many. Most people still fundamentally buy through the same sort of channels that they've bought through for quite a long time. A lot of people still buy product through search campaigns. They buy products through paid social campaigns. And that doesn't mean that that influencer content's not done an awful lot in order to help those purchases. And when you start to only measure that indirect impact, when you only measure the direct impact, so those clicks and codes, you're measuring about 20% of the total value of the channel. So for every £1 that you can see on your clicks and codes, there's probably £4 in terms of incremental value that you drove to the wider marketing ecosystem that doesn't show up on your dashboards. So suddenly a bunch of campaigns which didn't look like they might have failed in the past, times those numbers by 5, and suddenly that actually starts to look pretty positive. But instead, they're showing up in things like paid social campaigns, paid search campaigns, and ultimately things like kind of brand search campaigns that start to really run through, because none of these channels work in isolation. And when you start to actually see how these things work side by side, you start to get a value of both the 20% and the 80%. And when's the last time that any of your brands ran a TV campaign and said it failed because not enough people used the voucher code? People don't measure broadcast channels on voucher codes. And if that's where most of the industry is looking at influence marketing under the wrong lens. And if you actually start to measure both these direct and indirect impacts, you get a much fairer value of much better understanding of where the real value is. And you start to actually optimize towards driving that 80% of value, which the thing which drives that 80% of value is the good engaging content. So suddenly, rather than pushing the boring content, which actually kind of gets you in front of getting someone to click on an ad and use some codes, but it pushes you to be a little bit less creative, suddenly the really creative executions are driving 80%.